Stand by to launch FanStream Sports.
3, 2, 1. Let's start.
Hello, sports fans. Welcome to FanStream Sports. Nothing but pure sports.
H2P, Jeff that off H2P. Hail to Pitt. The Pitt Panthers, baby. Here's the Pitt Panthers. We got a multifaceted Pitt Panther podcast for you here on the Black and Gold Daily Blitz, or Blue and Gold today, as it were.
We'll go Blue and Gold, I guess, yeah.
Brought by FanStream Sports, presented by DSP Media Online, DSPMediaOnline.com. Yeah, man, 35 years ago today, right? You know what it is. Send it in, Jerome. 35 years ago today.
An amazing moment. Rafferty on the call, right?
Absolutely. I don't want to say put him on the map because he was already on Big Monday ESPN broadcast for Big East basketball, but that put him on the map, right? I mean, you know, he had the man-to-man and, you know, the big fella, all that stuff, but Send It in, Jerome became an iconic moment in, at the very least, college basketball sports, if not ESPN like lore, right? I mean, like that stands out. Some people will remember the call more than they do the actual dunk, which only, you know, a dozen or so players have ever done anyway.
Right. Is it the iconic moment in Pitt basketball history?
It's got to be. It's got to be.
I was trying to think of another one. I couldn't come up with one.
It was so iconic. I must have known in advance because I'm about 11, 12 years old.
Right.
And I'm begging my dad to go to the game that night. Maybe it was because it was a national television game. I don't know. It was on ESPN, which we didn't have at my dad's house at the time. And he said, no, son, it's a school night. It's a later start because of TV. I'll get you to one over the weekend or something. We had season tickets to Pitt, so I saw, you know, this was. I mean, I know the starting lineup on that team from that year. Sean Miller, who passed it to Jerome Lane. Charles Smith turned out to be a New York Knicks standout. Demetrius Gore was the small forward, and Jason Matthews was the shooting guard. That
Charles Smith from the Knicks was on that team?
Yes.
That's amazing.
Yeah, they went toe to toe back then with the Syracuse and Georgetown, and like, you know, that's
Villanova, Syracuse, St. John,
right?
Yeah.
St. John's with PJ and the sweaters.
Not PJ, Carnesecca in the sweaters.
Yes.
PJ was Seton Hall.
Right. Well, you know, at least at the conference, right?
You did, yeah.
You know, UConn came along after a while. Providence was always a thorn on everyone's side. Boston College, hit or miss. But Pitt was in it. Paul Evans, I believe, was the coach back then. And they were, not only did that put Rafferty on the map and Pitt on the map, but like Pitt was a contender those years that they had those starting five on the court. Yeah, my dad wouldn't let me go to the game.
Okay, did you ever forgive him for that or not?
I gotta believe in some way, shape, or form there's a growing moment, you know, where you might learn a parenting lesson about being a responsible parent. But on this day, every year, I fail to see what that lesson is.
Adam, so I think everyone's got some kind of moment like that in their lives where they were, you know, we talk about friend Andy Boothby, didn't have his last Elvis concert, didn't know he'd die. Mine is, I took my first Reds 70 against Braves, and it's 2 in the 7th, should have grand slam. In the game, Seaver pitched against, I don't know if Necro started or not, but anyways, Reds are up 8-2 in the 7th. Dad says, let's beat traffic and get home. We listened to the game the entire way home from Cincinnati to Columbus. The Braves came back and tied it 8-8. And we walked into the house, and in the 14th inning, George Foster hits a 2-run homer and win it 10-8. But we came home, we missed half the game for that. And I think everyone's got that moment, though, where a parent says, you know what? Let's not do this, or let's not go, or let's leave now, and all that kind of stuff. We all have that. That's your moment.
I got another one. I had tickets to Game 5 of the 1992 Stanley Cup. The Penguins swept the Blackhawks.
How do you not go?
You
had to see about a girl. You had to see about a girl.
It was 4-0. They won the series 4-0. We had tickets to Game 5.
Yeah.
So Game 4, I'm cheering for Chicago.
Of course you are. Right.
So I could go to a Stanley Cup game. It was my only shot at going to one of those games.
How great was
man,
the Big East during that time?
it's amazing, man. Like, and that team, I think Pitt generally has underachieved over the years. And they've also woefully achieved. Capel now is the coach there, and I believe they
Right.
went over a few years ago,
Right.
which is unheard of, right? I mean, now they're making their way back.
For the Big East, not for the season.
Correct. Over, yeah.
Right.
Over
They
in
went,
conference play.
they went
0-18,
Ewing,
I believe.
right? They went Ewing in the conference, but they did win some non-conference games against like Altoona or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, like Nicholls State or something. I don't
Right.
know.
Yes.
Right. So that whole conference was amazing. And Raleigh Massimino always on the court, bitching at the refs. But that it's not even, you can't even really call it a stadium. It was called the Fitzgerald Fieldhouse. It only fit 6798. That was the attendance, and but because it was so intimate,
that's all they fit in it. Was 6798 seriously?
Yeah, look at the video. I believe our
it's a high school gym.
Our beloved producer Tim Ham is going to post a video of the famous dunk.
He better.
Embedded in this podcast.
Goes ahead. Lane's on the other wing. He finds. Yeah! Send it in, Jerome! He joins Darryl Dawkins, Lucius Jackson, amongst others.
Look around. It is a small. It's a field house. That's what it's called. A small, but the ceilings were low. The seats were close, and it was loud. I mean, it wasn't like Carrier Dome. Of course, it didn't have anything on the Carrier Dome back then. But it was an intense environment, and it made every game. You could feel every game you were there, and maybe just because I was a kid and I thought it was bigger than I mean, I saw guys like Ewing and Mourning and Mutombo come through that arena, kick the shit out of Pitt every single time.
Right.
But it was. I mean, you saw some major players come through that.
Chris Mullen, Walter Perry for those teams, Sherman Douglas and Derek Coleman. Oh my God, yep. I'm so jealous of that. Even though you got screwed out of the big moment. The fact you saw all these other people coming through, though, dude, that was look. And I'm a Big Ten guy. I'm telling you that like 5 or 6 year Big East period, maybe 7 years, whatever it was. Every single game was must watch if you could see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean they called it Big Monday on ESPN.
That's why they did it, yeah, all because of that, man. Those teams were, and the fact that 3 teams made the Final Four the one year when Georgetown, St. John's, Villanova all got in, and then you know who the 4th team was?
I know.
Memphis State. That's who it was. Who's now Memphis, but Memphis State was the 4th one that got in though. But those battles, though, my God.
Yeah, man. The bigger games, eventually they started putting the bigger games against Georgetown and Syracuse at the Civic Arena where the Penguins used to play.
Right.
And those would always be, a huge turnout and bigger deals, but it just didn't have the same feel to it as that feel. I mean, you could hear like the thunderous cracking of the rim and the glass. And I mean, it was just, it's an iconic moment. It really was. It was the best moment I never attended.
So you being the obviously long time lived in Pitt. I've never lived in Pittsburgh. You live in Pittsburgh. Is when I ask you if I ask you to name me prominent Pittsburgh basketball players, is Jerome Lane top of the list? And is there how big of a gap between like I say, hey, name me the guy that that you like watching or whatever? Is there who's second? Is there a big gap between 1 and 2?
I think they're all the three biggest ones were on that team. Sean Miller obviously has gone on to have himself a pretty fine coaching career.
Sure.
And Charles Smith had the best of the NBA career.
Yeah.
But Lane has the biggest moment. And it's funny. Sean Miller, I believe I was watching one of those like anniversary shows, and Rafferty says that Sean Miller says that he owes him because Miller made the no look pass.
Oh,
so you owe me for your broadcasting moment that day because I made the no look pass.
It was such a cool moment when that happened, the dunk and all that. That was, but really, And of all the things you see in the Big East, like that's what the Big East was.
Yeah.
Those kind of moments, those kind of matchups, those kind of games. And even, it was, I was thinking about this. If they ever made a movie about the Big East, does Danny DeVito have to play Raleigh Massimino? I think he does. I don't know who plays other guys, but I just think like he has to play. Maybe you could get Pacino to play Carnesecca. Maybe. I could probably see that happening.
Yeah. He's got now that he's got the hunchback a little bit,
a little hunchback a little bit, but I don't know who plays some of the players. I'm not sure. I couldn't figure all that out. But I was trying to think of the coaches though, and who could play which ones. And those two.
Who's something O'Reilly? An actor, comedic actor.
John O'Reilly.
John O'Reilly would play Paul Evans for Pitt.
That could happen also.
The big curly head of hair.
Right. Or you shave it down and he plays Boeheim.
Nah, you gotta get someone else for Boeheim. You get.
Oh, I know you get for Boeheim. You get the guy who was in the Stern movie and he was in the Wine movie, the Paul
Giamatti.
Giamatti. I think he's probably Boeheim, right? I know he's not tall enough.
He could also pull off Massimino. It could go both ways.
Right, he could. Right. We got that's a whole other podcast, though. Yes, we could
do
that.
All the guys coming in to play Kramer.
Yes, there we go. Yes, that's what we'll do.
All right, real quick. I don't want to water this down, but I got some more Pitt topics because it's so rare that I have Pitt topics, and it's related to kind of Pitt getting back on the map.
Right.
The last couple of weeks they've had 3 transfers come back home. They've all played high school. They're all high school standouts in Western Pennsylvania. Phil Jerkovich, quarterback at Pine Richland. He was recruited by Notre Dame. He played at Boston College. And after Kenny Pickett left, he immediately hopped on the transfer wagon. And he's coming. He had over 5,000 total yards of offense his senior season, Pennsylvania State record. Donovan McMillan, Peters Township, versatile safety. He went to Florida for a couple years, mostly as a gunner on special teams, but he spurned Pac-12, Big Ten, other ACC teams to come back to Pitt in the transfer portal. He was the number 8 prospect coming out of Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And Derek Davis from Gateway, safety turned running back. He had over 2,000 total yards his junior season in high school. Went to LSU, and he's now coming back to Pitt. None of this might mean a whole lot to you, but the common denominator here is their head coach, Pat Narduzzi, who's a former defensive coordinator for Michigan State,
right?
Youngstown State grad. He was an assistant at Cincinnati. So there's some of that Midwestern tie in there. We're based in Columbus, and you and I are, not Narduzzi. And it speaks, I believe, to kind of that this is kind of what recruiting has come to now. But it speaks to the grasp he's starting to get on some more local talent, whereas in the past, Pitt's been scrapping and losing out to the Penn States and Ohio States in the area, and they're starting to get some of that moxie back, I believe.
So, in this, people might know this, but if you're not old like Adam and I, but in the 70s and early 80s, Pitt football. Their Penn State game was always huge every year. They ended the season, all that kind of stuff. And Pitt, their ceiling was national title. That was what they won, a national title. Obviously, they were able to do that. They got guys like Dorsett and Reno through there, Hugh Green. So their ceiling was that. What do you think their ceiling is now? And what do you think that will change?
So the last two seasons for sure.
Sure.
They won the ACC, or they lead the 2 years ago. Yeah. Pickett took the night off at the Peach Bowl against Michigan State, and Narduzzi said we would have hung 21 more on them if Pickett had played.
Sure.
Okay, maybe so. Kenneth Walker didn't play that game either, so riddle me that.
You don't know, right? Yeah.
This year they won the Sun Bowl, and they are 2 bowl wins the last 4 seasons. They're competitive. It used to be, I suppose. Clemson, took a step back, but it used to just be Clemson and everybody else. And I think Pitt's in that conversation. They're not in finals. They're not in BCS
The CFP.
category.
CFP
That
too.
too. But I think now that you have a 12-team playoff, I think that is in their scope. I think they can. I think that is a realistic goal. I don't know if it's.
Right.
I don't know if I'm not going to chalk them in there.
Right.
But I do believe that is a realistic goal for Pitt to have.
It's people don't know, and I wasn't a huge Pitt fan growing up. That Pitt Penn State game, that was like huge, vicious rivalry every year.
Mm-hmm.
Did they always play at the end of the year?
Yeah. And then when that fell off the map, West Virginia took over the backyard brawl.
Right.
And those two games were always the game you look forward to. Harder to schedule that now. I mean, Pitt Penn State won't play for quite a while. They had a couple of home and homes earlier in the 2010 decade. West Virginia is still very much in the mix, but they play them before conference play now, so it doesn't have that same end of season. This is the game of all games to end the season. It's hard, it's hard ever since the Big Five really took over the landscape. It's harder to get invested in a lot of these rivalry games. Pitt UNC, okay, it doesn't really do anything for me.
Would you want Pitt in the Big Ten?
No, I mean, listen, I'm old school. I want the Big East back. I mean, that's when it felt real. The Big Ten, at least, has stayed mostly consistent with the teams in that conference.
I mean, the Big East isn't coming back in football. So I'm saying, if you have a choice right now, do you like Pitt in the ACC, or if I tell you I can drop Pitt in the Big Ten, what would you rather have?
I don't think it would create as much buzz as it sounds. Geographically, of course, that's where it makes the most sense.
Right.
But for better or for worse, I think they're kind of stuck in that square peg round hole ACC conference. And
I'd love to see Penn State every year and have it be a meaningful game. I would love to see that again. But I think
I know it's not a pipe dream. It'll happen again, but it's not going to be
it won't be end of the season.
No. So thanks for reminiscing with me a little bit on Pitt. You don't get to do that much. The 35-year anniversary of my dad trying to teach me a valuable lesson in life, but really all he did was make me a bitter old man. Send it in Jerome.
Wait, have you done that with your kids yet?
Oh, yeah. My oldest son loves to watch it.
No, have you had a moment, though, where you said to them, we're not doing this because of this, and tried to, and where they will be talking about this on a podcast or whatever 20 years from now and say, my dad, we had tickets. I wanted to go. He said no because school the next day or whatever.
No, not specifically. We handpick the games during the summer when the schedule's out, and we can kind of game plan it. I used to record a lot of the Penguin games when they're in the playoffs, and then show my oldest son the game the next day or, whenever the next opportunity was. And I believe it was against, it might've been against the Red Wings in the Cup. I'm not sure. The first one that they lost. And every game I had showed him had these dramatic comeback victories, and, Crosby and Malkin just flipped the switch, and just like Lemieux and Yager used to do. And this one they didn't win. He was mad that I showed him. He's like, why would you show me that? Every other game you show me, they win. I'm like, well, life lesson, right? You don't win them all.
Thank you, Boothby. Life lesson.
Then I don't think he's hung on to that one in a bitter way that I've held on to.
In a Jerome Lane way.
And Rafferty and McCall, right?
This was fun, brother. I appreciate it, man.
All right, man. Hey, tune in soon to another edition of the Black and Gold Daily Blitz. Maybe we'll talk a little football.
Maybe we will.
Good day.